We've got some adjusted expectations for the Arizona Cardinals for the rest of the 2024 season. What are they? Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cardinals, Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter, Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen, free wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started, man. Go check them out. So, a lot happened this past week directly affecting the Arizona Cardinals, and the majority of it has been positive. The Cardinals sit atop the NFC West by one full game after the Seahawks beat the 49ers yesterday. And, I mean, come on. Ain't nobody see this coming. Nobody saw this happen before the season started. Nobody looked into their crystal ball and saw this happening. And at this point, during the progression of this season, it's just kind of progressed this way. It's kind of grown into this where it hasn't been, the Cardinals won a bunch of one-score games and, that's the reason why they're 6-4. A ball bounces this way, a ball bounces that way. They're 2-8 or whatever. It wasn't that. They've won a couple games by one score. They've lost a couple games by one score. The games they lost were against the Bills and the Lions, two of the best teams in football. And right now, as you're looking for the rest of the season, of course, there's going to be adjusted expectations. Not wildly adjusted. I've discussed this a bunch. Like, you're going to be looking at the Cardinals as a team that, I don't know, playoffs are there for sure. But I'm not saying this team's going to win a Super Bowl this year. I mean, you're not saying a team is going to make a deep playoff run as a favorite to make the NFC Championship game. There are a handful of teams that are better than them on paper for sure still. Especially on the defensive side of the ball. With that said, they're in a fantastic position that's sustainable. This is not a team whose offense is going to just completely forget how to score points. This is not a team whose defense is just going to forget how to show up for games and play out of their shoes as compared to the talent that they have on the roster. That part is over. We saw in the Miami game things change. It just takes a while to get some momentum. It takes a while to just have things mesh, especially with a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. now being drafted. The offensive line has been elite. The offense, more than not, has been very efficient. There are times the Green Bay game was terrible. Okay, the Washington game was a throwaway. I've always canceled that performance out with the Rams game. One was bad, one was out of this world amazing. Cancel it out. And now you're looking at a team who is poised and mature and cohesive and led properly. And looking at the rest of the schedule that is going to be, on paper, again, not as difficult as the first 10 weeks. I'm going to save that till the second segment, what the Cardinals must avoid. And that will be discussed. And it's more for the fans. It's more for the talking heads than anything else. But, you come here for level-headed, mostly, content where I treat you like adults. So I'm going to treat you like adults in the next segment. With the Cardinals sitting at 6-4 atop the NFC West, now the 3 seed in the NFC, if the playoffs were to start today, 1 game out, 2 games out of the 2 seed, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter because only the 1 seed gets by. You host the playoff game if you win your division. The adjusted expectations are the Cardinals should win the division. Because I witnessed, I got to go. I'm up in Northern California. You can see my backdrop is a little bit different. I'm up in Northern California visiting my mom and stepdad, and my stepdad's a 49ers fan, obviously living up here. So we went to a 49ers game against the Seahawks yesterday. And I'll tell you what, and this is not with a lens of Arizona Cardinals. It must be positive for them. Both of those teams looked bad. They looked unprepared. They looked disheveled on both sides of the ball. Now, the Seahawks starting center up and retired this past week. So, it wasn't great with Geno Smith. Some of the, the snaps and everything went over his head. Jackson Smith and Jigba look okay. DK Metcalf looked okay. The defense for the 49ers looked the best out of any group. But the Seahawks defense didn't look terrible. Like, the offense has just looked disheveled. Kyle Shanahan looks unprepared compared to what we saw. Christian McCaffrey didn't have the burst. He had 100 all-purpose yards. But my point is that the Cardinals are ascending. The 49ers seem to be descending, whether it be through injury or needing Brock Purdy to do too much or whatever it is. And the Seahawks are just kind of, Geno Smith, one of the greatest stories in the history of football. Okay. And he's got limitations. And I think the Cardinals can exploit them. It'll be interesting to see what happens on Sunday as they travel to Seattle to further increase their NFC West lead. But I think that adjusted expectations, the Cardinals are playing the best football by a pretty good margin of all the teams of the NFC West. And I'll tell you who's playing the second best football. It's the Rams. The Rams are the team that worries me the most out of any of the teams. And the Cardinals play them in Week 17, which should be fascinating. Adjusted expectations are, if the Cardinals don't win the division, it won't be a lost season by any stretch. We've already punted on that. This is a win of a season. Okay? This isn't 7-0 and 10-2 and then not winning the division. This is 6-4, one full game ahead of everybody. They've got the tiebreaker because they're 2-0. They can move it, stretch it to 3-0 in the division if they win in Seattle on Sunday. The adjusted expectations are the Cardinals should is strong. Could win the NFC West and have an inside track to do so. Not just because of record, but by how they're playing on both sides of the ball and special teams. Oh, the 49ers special team is awful. The special teams are atrocious. The Cardinals have, we'll see if Matt Prater, supplants Chad Ryland, because Matt Prater is set to return, and Blake Gilkin's one of the best young punters in the NFL. The Cardinals are set. Winning the division is maybe what the one adjusted expectation is from finishing last to really consciously thinking that they should win the division when things line up the way they do. And I'm not even talking about the schedule that they have. I'll talk about that in the next segment. I'll explain why. It just kind of feels like they should win the division, even though should is a strong word, and much will happen between now and the end of the season with the 7 games they still have to play. Locked on Cardinals, your team every day. I mean, we're going to talk so much more about this. I'm going to go more in depth just about. It's no longer tempering expectations. It's managing and adjusting them. Tempering expectations was when they beat the Rams. It's like, okay, let's relax. Tempering expectations was when they lost to the Lions. It's like, okay, let's relax. Green Bay, let's relax. Like, everybody's just so one way or the other. World's burning or they're in heaven. It's like, that's not, but things are starting to level out. The valleys are way shallower. Yeah. And the peaks aren't, skyscrapers anymore. It's just kind of like a flow of competent football, win-loss. They're playing competent football. After the Green Bay game, everything has changed. One thing that must be avoided from now to the end of the season, as we're under this motif of adjusted expectations. I'll discuss it next. Locked on Cardinals, your team every day. This episode of Locked on Cardinals is brought to you by our friends at Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? History, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study any of these things at school? Probably not. Or if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning in history, of the Constitution, the great American story, A Land of Hope, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, and a brand new documentary-style course on Marxism, socialism, and communism. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or even just the lectures you can enjoy. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockdown to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockdown to register, hillsdale.edu/locked-on. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is also brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. 10 million subscribers, billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks it's made daily fantasy easy and accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cheese. Run your game all season long with Prize Picks. Deposits are easy. And you can make an entry in less than 60 seconds. It's not just NFL either. It's NBA, which is in massively full swing. It's NHL. It's golf. It's every sport, not just NFL, but, Locked On Cardinals, Locked On Podcast Network, football. And if you do cash in one of your entries, you can get the money withdrawn into your account in as little as 15 minutes. It takes all of the stress away. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you place your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you place your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. So this is just a fascinating time of the year for the Cardinals, And for those that have listened for a long time to Locked On Cardinals, first of all, thank you. For those that, listened to me on radio when I was on radio for 12, 14 years before just pivoting just to this podcast, thank you. I may bark loudly, but I try to keep things as level-headed as possible. And for the rest of the season, that's something that I suggest people adopt as well. Yes, their schedule eases up. They've got Seattle twice. Seattle's going to be a tough out. But, people think that that's just a walkover game. I think that's ridiculous. But it eases up a bit. Okay, so they've got Seattle twice. They've got New England. They've got Carolina. They've got teams that are winnable games. They've got the Rams in week 17, which could be for the division. Incredibly meaningful. They've got Minnesota, and it's still TBD. If you listened last week, I believe it was on Friday, there's a chance that the Cardinals could get flexed in week 13 to Monday Night Football. And the fact that I think it's really going to come down if the Cardinals win on Sunday in Seattle, but we'll see. We could find out a lot sooner. So I'm ready for the lights to be as bright as possible. Let it rip. Who cares? Let it absolute rip. Because if the Cardinals want to win anything sustainably this year, next year, years in the future, like big-time games to get in the playoffs, big-time games to clinch a seed, big-time games, whatever it is, to hopefully, inevitably, get deep in the conference championship or maybe a Super Bowl, they got to win where the lights are brightest. And they've done it this year. They won their one, primetime game against the Chargers at home in dramatic fashion. And even though the schedule is lightened up, that's the thing that everybody must avoid. Oh, the Cardinals are set because the Cardinals are set. Oh, they have Carolina, New England wins, chill. We just went through the bona fide dictionary definition antithesis of that during the first 10 weeks. The fact that the Cardinals won 6 games before their bye, I was like, man, if they go 3-7, that's still pretty much a win. The Cardinals have already, 66% X'd their win total from last year. I don't care what the situation was. So having the utmost respect for every game moving forward, regardless of opponent, is paramount. And I'm not saying the players won't. They will. Jonathan Gannon leads them that way. There's no overlooking anything. And it's going to be really, because this is the transition that we're looking at here. And I've talked about this as, kind of a table setting before seasons start, where teams will be looking at their calendar, their schedule, and they'll be like W, L, or question mark. And all you want to be is not a W for other teams, like talent level wise, how you play, everything like that. That's kind of that's the the floor for where you want to be as an NFL team. At least a question mark where teams are looking like, oh, that's a win when you play the Cardinals. The Cardinals went from wins across the board pretty much from all of the teams to question mark /L. And when the Cardinals are looking at their schedule now, and this is, metaphor, but Cardinals look at their schedule, that you actually see games where it's like they should win that game. 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 Ain't nobody talk about that before the season started. There was a lot of question marks, not bad ones, but what is going to happen with this? Is it going to be this year? Is it going to be next year? Not so, is it going to happen, or why is Steve Keim doing things the way he's doing? It doesn't have a negative connotation with the question marks. There was just a lot of unknowns with a lot of young players on the roster, a lot of aging players on the roster. How were they going to mold together? And then you see Budda Baker and James Conner have pseudo career years. And then you see the corners with Garrett Williams, and Max Melton really starting to have a stranglehold on opposing wide receivers. It's not perfect yet, but it's so much better than what we thought it was going to be right out the gate. And the pass rush has been reborn the last couple of weeks against, sure, bad offensive lines, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. They're producing. They produced during the first 3 weeks. They produced the last couple of weeks. So things are starting to take shape a little bit more quickly, and you're looking at the Cardinals' schedule for the rest of the year, and this is the opposite of what I just said should happen, but it's for the exercise. It's, man, there's some W's on this schedule for the rest of the year, and a good chunk of them. Like, I feel like whoever gets to 10 wins wins the NFC West. Whoever gets to 10 wins first. And I think when you look at the Cardinals, especially if they get a win in Seattle on Sunday, that clinches at least a 500 record in the NFC West, which is going to be paramount down the stretch. Paramount down the stretch. Because if they lose to the Rams and there's a tiebreaker, it's head-to-head, 1-1, division record. The Cardinals are going to have a better divisional record more times than not, or at least tie, and it'll go to the next tiebreaker. The one thing that must be avoided for the rest of the season is overlooking any sort of opponents from anybody, because it's a thought process. It's not a sure gone. This is how the actual players inside the locker room and the coaches think, but it's just a thing that needs to be avoided. So many fan bases get into traps of, Super Bowl or bust. Oh, this team, hot bleep. They're hot bleep. And then 2 weeks later, they lose 2 games in a row, and that entire je ne sais quoi is gone. Level-headed, one game at a time. This is a perfect chef's kiss. Nailed it. Man, I'm really starting to make that a thing. Whoever read that in my comments, that's your fault. Now it's in my action potentials. I don't even think about it. It's the action potentials firing, baby. That's, again, I don't take, responsibility for what my action potentials do. It's science, man. Anyways, squirrel, we're back. Seattle is a perfect litmus test. Perfect. On the road, division opponent of a massive win they just had on the road, where now they're tied for second with the other two teams. If they want to make a push, it's now. And this is a perfect time for them to be put to the test by the hottest team in the NFC West. So if the Cardinals can overcome this, if the offense can play well, if the defense can stack up, and the Cardinals get a win and move to 7-4 and separate themselves even more from Seattle in the NFC West and go to 3-0 in the division, we're having different conversations again. I'll leave you with this. The thing that must be avoided the most is taking the second half of the season too lightly with the teams that they play. That's number one, because what just happened was the opposite of what everybody expected to happen, times a bunch for the Cardinals' record now. And if you disagree with that, that's fine. You can play revisionist history. Come on. Another thing, lightly, that must be avoided is getting too high or too low with win and loss. Everybody's so quick to judge. Every week, it's like, oh, that was it, or, oh, they're going to the Super Bowl. Relax. I treat you like adults here. We're not going to be getting too high or too low regarding one win or one loss for the Cardinals from here down the home stretch. I promise you that. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. Things that must be doubled down on. The opposite of avoidance. And this is directly correlated to the play on the field. I'll discuss it next. Roll on here. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet, man. Super easy. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and partner of the NFL. All right, so things the Cardinals must double down on. This offense needs to hit another level. And that's fair. Okay? This offense has looked so good the last couple weeks. So good. There is no, like, if the Cardinals lose games, it's got to be because the defense can't stop somebody. Like, there's a point of no return with the offense where once things, like as an employee, people, expect your performance, expect your production, like as a sale in sales or whatever. You're the top producer. Okay, cool. You can enjoy that for a second and then go do it again because now the company's relying on you to do that. The defense has played out of their absolute minds, fantastically coached. Everybody's starting to mold together, seeing potentially Darius Robinson coming back this week for his first NFL action. We'll see what he can, add to the pass rush. I think that they figured something out. But if you're going to give me a shelf life compared to the offense has a longer shelf life. I just, they've got better players. What needs to be doubled down on is the offense must lead this team to wins. This is not a time anymore where there's excuses like, oh, the offense is just not on the same page. No. That used to be a cop-out because the play calling was bad or Kyler Murray wasn't playing well, the offensive line was bad or whatever it is. There are zero excuses for why the offense shouldn't be progressing even more than what we've seen. I'm not saying putting up a 40-burger every week or nothing. I'm not saying putting up 25 points a week or nothing. That's not what I'm saying. They're going to play tough defenses down the stretch. What I'm saying is the offense can't be the reason the Cardinals lose games if they were to lose games for the rest of the year, including playoffs. They need to be the anchor for this team. They need to be the leader. They need to be charging. That needs to be the offense. That needs to be the side of the ball that is feared by all. And it's starting to get there. Okay, we're starting to see the organic and natural growth like we've discussed over multiple weeks, especially with Marvin Harrison Jr. Trey McBride is becoming a tight end, like a true bona fide, like not just in reputation. Like we're starting to see it. I don't care about the touchdowns. I don't give a rip about the touchdowns. James Conner is there. Trey Benson has shown. Amari DiMercado can jump in a pinch. Okay, like this offense, the offensive line is the best offensive line Kyler Murray maybe has ever had in his entire life, from Pop Warner to now. And that's without Jonah Williams, and that's without Will Hernandez at right guard. So there's no excuse at all for the Cardinals offense to not produce for the rest of the year. There's no reason why. This is a double down times a million that this offense must lead and strike fear in opposing defenses. And this isn't taking too much weight in just a couple weeks. If you look through 11 games, we've seen far more positives from the offense than negatives. The negatives have been yuck, brutal. The defense held their own against the Rams, and the Cardinals offense could not get it done. They couldn't put up more than 13 points after the Cardinals defense blanked the Lions in the second half of that game. Green Bay was a mockery to offensive football. It was offensive. See what I did there? Yeah. I'll be here all week. This offense must even level up its efficiency. It must not regress 1 iota, 1 centimeter. Because the defense, as well as they've played, and you're starting to really gain trust that that's something they can do. Oh, you know what? Let's punt on 4th and 3 down or up 2 with a minute and a half left because this defense has played so well. They're not all the way there yet with absolutely, but they're far closer than anybody expected this year. And they're really getting to that point where it's like, all right, trust the defense because they've shown that. Walk like a duck, talk like a duck. They have this year. And again, it hasn't been perfect. It's hard to stop NFL offenses, especially some high-powered ones that the Cardinals have played. But look at what the Chargers are doing. I'm not sure who reached out or mentioned me on Twitter who said that. Like, this Chargers offense, the Chargers win is looking a lot better and better. Look at how that offense is playing. And the Cardinals held them to 0 touchdowns. So, there's that. In summation, it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to talk about today because it's the first week. I'm not talking about the game yet. This is a perfect time for kind of let's all sit around the campfire and talk about what we've seen so far and what to expect, what is rational to think will happen, and what to avoid. And I think we nailed that on today's show. Thanks for hanging out. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Remember, without you, there is no me. I will talk to you tomorrow.